Hello?
Hey,
Am I interrupting?
is that Richard Dreyfuss?
That is Richard Dreyfuss.
Hello, Richard.
Wow.
We're just going through. I'm Simon, and the other voice is Mark. We're just going through the movies to avoid this week on
Hello,
television.
Richard.
Ah, I can give you a long list.
Well, let's just round this off. TV movies of the week, so bad they're bad, includes Monster Trucks, Dinner for Schmucks. Mark, what is our TV movie of the week, so bad it's bad? Whilst Richard is listening in.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. The worst movie on TV this week is The Deer Hunter, which is a film which should never have won Best Picture over Coming Home, which is a film, the script of which was based originally in a short story that was then worked up into a script that Michael Cimino ended up falsely giving the impression was based on experiences that he personally had had. And the worst thing about it is that the first movement of it, the wedding movement, is so brilliant that everything else that comes afterwards is ill-disciplined and indulgent. You should read Michael Deely's book. Is it called Blade Runners, Deer Hunters, and Blowing the Bloody Doors Off? You should read Stephen Bach's book, Final Cut. And it is one of those things that just astonishes me that people still revere The Deer Hunter as a great work of art. It really isn't.
Okay, I'm just going to Richard. You might not want to join in that conversation, but it is
I don't
true.
mind at all. I have my own antipathy for Cimino. I went to hand an envelope to Steven Spielberg one night at a restaurant, and he was sitting with this guy. And after about 2 minutes, I said to Steven, would you come outside for a minute? And he came out, and he said, what's up? I said, who is that guy you're sitting with? And he said, it's Cimino. Why? I said, well, I got this bath of negative, horrible, disgusting vibes from him. And you can take it for what it's worth, but he's a disgusting creature. And then he went back to finish his meal. And then I heard, sure enough, he came true. It was everything I said.
Well, there's a story in Michael Deely's book about when Deer Hunter won the Oscar for Best Picture. And Deely writes at great length about what Cimino did to get himself a producer credit on that film. And Deely writes rather beautifully that the Oscar that he has for producing The Deer Hunter has Michael Cimino's name on it. And so he keeps it on a very high shelf to obscure that particular problem.
All right. Okay. So this is great. We should say we haven't booked Richard Dreyfuss to talk about Deer Hunter or anything else. We booked him to talk about his own movie, which is called Astronaut, which is coming to streaming services from the 24th. Where do we find you, Richard? Where are you at the moment?
I'm in North San Diego County in a place called Encinitas. And before we go away from Cimino for a second, the thing that was so impressive about, or seemed to be so impressive at the moment, was that there was, as you said, there was this great opening set piece, which didn't connect up in any rational way with other great set pieces. And that's why it got the award, was that even though he skipped the little basics like, narrative sense, he had these great set pieces of De Niro going back to get Chris and like that. And each of these sections of the film were, only when you disconnect them from the rest of the film, they were all great, but he neglected to connect them. And so it doesn't have a terrible reputation here, equal at least to his own. And when he started to do the Western, what was the name of that Western afterwards?
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, the story I heard right away was he flew up and he took a look at this town. They had built two sides to a street on either side of which was a complete town, city hall, different shops and such. It was a very broad street, and he was looking down the middle of the street, and then he turned to the production people and said, move the town 3 feet over to the left. And that's when word got out about Michael. He was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have Richard Dreyfuss speaking to us on the program today, and I would just like to point out that I have at least once tried to get Richard to talk about his movie Astronaut, but we keep going back to talking about Michael Cimino. So who knows where it's going to go, because Richard can talk about anything that he chooses to talk about. But there is a new Richard Dreyfuss movie which is coming to streaming services on the 24th. It is called Astronaut. Richard, tell us how you got involved in this.
How did I get involved? I was sent a script by Sheila, and I read it and called her back, and they were thrilled that I had called them back, and I was thrilled that they were thrilled. We talked about it, and it's hard to remember now, but I think it was simply that there was a sense for me of closure with Close Encounters, and the idea that here was this well thought of civilian who had spent his whole life near but not in paradise. And it was about, it was a very real little story. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to Sheila when she hears me say that I was surprised that it was so well received. I'm thrilled that people seem to like it. And I thought that the timbre of the film, the tone of it, was so low key that it wouldn't have the impact that it should. But I had a blast playing out Roy Neary's Plan B dream. He actually went, and this guy, if you think about it, well, I shouldn't give any spoilers. I shouldn't give any spoiler alerts.
Richard, so the Sheila that you're talking about, that's Sheila McLeod. This is her debut feature. And you have said before that it was a bit, when you read the script, it was like she'd been living in my attic and that she'd hit a bullseye. What's the bullseye that she hit? Just because it had the echoes, like you said, the closure with Close Encounters, was that it?
Yes. She really did know that there were two hearts in my chest, and one of them had been fulfilled in 1976, and the other was being fulfilled now.
Let's play a clip. Let's play you a clip from Astronaut in which you hear Richard's character Angus talking to Barney, who's his grandson. Here's a clip.
Granddad, can I look?
Yeah, as long as you stop calling me Granddad.
Wow, looks so close.
Yeah, like you can reach out and touch it. People have been looking up at the stars forever. And I think it's always for the same reason.
What?
To see where we belong. That's a question I've been asking myself my whole life.
I wish I could be an astronaut.
You can. You can be anything you want.
They only want smart people.
Well, you're smart.
I got a D in math.
Hey, I wasn't very good at math myself.
So, Richard, the story here is that the central character who's always dreamed of going to space, suddenly there is this lottery that it's possible to enter, and there is the possibility of becoming an astronaut. And despite the fact that there are many reasons why he can't, to do with his age and to do with his health, he enters the lottery anyway. And the film then plays out as how his dream works out. And you mentioned that comparison with Close Encounters. And that famously, Steven Spielberg said that if he had gone back to make Close Encounters now, he wouldn't have let your character go off in the spaceship at the end. So it kind of there's two sides to this, which is both films are about somebody who is obsessed with the idea of going into space, and we all know that famously, it's not a plot spoiler, we all know that famously at the end of Close Encounters, and if you don't know this already, tough, he gets into the spaceship and goes off. But you also know that and the shark blew up. But you also know that Spielberg said that if he'd gone back and done it now, he wouldn't have let him go.
Yes, and I told him that, with all due respect, he was wrong.
Mhm.
Um, I mean it. I don't think there is another ending to the film, and I think if he had been feeling that, he wouldn't have made the movie to begin with, and that would be legit. But I can't imagine, and maybe it's just that my imagination is limited, but I can't imagine starting that film and then not having him go. It would belie the entire premise of the film. So, but Stephen didn't become a parent until after that film, and that's probably why he's saying this. Um, but I'd like to, if the world were a different place, you should call Stephen and have him muse or rhapsodize on what the ending might have been. That I'd be interested to hear.
Well, we'd be very happy if you want to set it up for us, Richard. That'd be great.
One of the things that's interesting about The Astronaut, and I've actually seen it twice now, and I don't want to give away the ending, but one of the things that's interesting about it is that it could have ended in any number of ways. In fact, I think the difference between Astronaut and, well, there's many differences between Astronaut and Close Encounters, but one of them is, you're right, Close Encounters has only got one ending, but Astronaut could have ended in a number of different ways.
Well, that's true. And there were times I didn't quite realize the limitations put on everybody by the lack of budget. And they were so constrained by the lack of money that I was in my usual mode of making suggestions and not thinking of how much they might cost. And and then I realized that they had to work with an infinitesimal amount of money. And I went to the Canadian, or what, I forget the name of the organization that sponsored the film and sponsors filmmakers in Canada. And I said, "You're doing this wrong." I said, if you let people fulfill a dream and make a film, let them make it. Don't restrain them so much that they can't make the film in any way that they're thinking of. And I may be speaking out of turn, and maybe Sheila would completely disagree with me. But I think that if she had another $1 million, she would have made. I'm not kidding, and I don't quite understand why, if you go to Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival, you know you can make a budget if it's under 500,000, or if it's more than 300 million.
Mhm.
Anything in between, you won't get.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Astronaut needed just enough, just a little bit more, that might have really done well for the tone of the film. But in terms of his goal and his uh, getting his heart's desire, I think that's great. And when I say ideas they couldn't afford, I mean better or more attached music and background things, the little things that you don't notice that would have made a huge difference in this film. I applaud Sheila for making it, and for writing it, and I loved, making the movie. But just a little bit more money would have really done that show a lot of good.
Mhm. Just a couple of points before our time runs out with you, Richard. And the first one is, I'm sure I read some time ago that you were already retired and that you weren't making movies anymore. Was that not true, or were you just tempted back because you wanted to do this?
No, actually, that's quite true, and it's still true. And the only reason I started to make films was that there was a financial crisis in my family, and I had no alternative. But I had retired, and I had no intention of coming back from Oxford. I was at Oxford University for 4 years, and I did not intend to come back and shoot films. I had been I went to London to do the producers for Mel Brooks, and I had told him that I didn't know how to dance and I didn't know how to sing, and he said, "Oh, who cares? You're funny." And then 6 days before the first preview audience, I was fired because I didn't dance and I didn't sing. That's what I was there for. And and I just decided, and I told some people that weekend that I was staying anyway because I had blocked out that time, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to see if I could go to school, and Oxford offered me what they called a senior research advisory position because I was interested in finding out how the absence of teaching civics had helped destroy my country. And so I was there doing that. And when I came home, I thought I had married, I had fallen in love and married, and I thought we were going to take river cruises, and I was going to write. And then my business manager called and said, no, you're not. So I had to go back to work.
Okay, well, we're glad that you're working, of course, Richard. And the final thing I just want to say before we lose the line altogether, a few weeks ago, Mark and I, we've been doing this show for a while, and I can't remember why, but we were discussing about if there was a period in time that we could go back to, what would it be? And the only thing that we agreed on, I seem to remember that I suggested a diner courtesy of the era of American Graffiti. And we both said, yes, that's exactly where we would both go back with the rock and roll soundtrack that was in that movie. And it's in your diner. So I just wanted to include you in it because you were there at that time. But Mark and I will both have as a fantasy being able to be in that diner in American Graffiti. And you were there. So we just wanted to mention it.
Well, thank you. It's a compliment to George Lucas, and I think it's cool. I would pick the Civil War myself, but what the hell?
Okay, well, that sounds like the subject for a whole new interview, but that sounds fascinating. Richard, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much indeed for spending some time with us today.
Thank you.